بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين. I am very happy to meet with you, and I was also very pleased that Alhamdulillah you had this course. I thought maybe I share with you something, but I don't inshallah take too much of your time, and we can have like question and answer. Maybe you have already read in the introduction of the book Shi'a Islam Origins, Faith and Practices that how this book came to exist. So when I was in Qom, I had a series of lectures for some of our international students, some sisters in the Jamaat Zahra in Qom, Salamullah alayha, and I shared with them different aspects of Shi'a Islam. Then when I went to Manchester for my PhD in 96, I went in October 96, I went to Sheffield and then into Manchester, and I stayed in Manchester. I started my PhD there. So we started a second course on Shi'a Islam in Manchester, and then I was asked by Islamic College to write a book on Shi'a Islam. So around 2000, 2001, I was trying to write this book. Also, I was asked by some of the Shia centers around 2000 to write a short introduction to Shi'a Islam that they can use. So I wrote Discovering Shi'a Islam, which is like a shorter version, and Shi'a Islam Origins, Faith and Practices as a more detailed version. So something that I was very much how we can introduce Shia Islam in the way that it would answer questions that people who study religions and denominations normally have. So I tried to imagine a potential prospective reader who may not be Shia and he wants to know about Shia Islam, or who may be Shia but wants to know more about Shia Islam. One of the things that at that time I was thinking about was, what are some of the general characteristics of Shia Islam? You have noticed that there is a chapter about general characteristics of Shia Islam where we discuss rationality, spirituality, and search for justice. So this was my attempt to give my readers something not about history or about doctrines or practices or statistics, etc. Something which explain the spirit of Shia Islam as manifest in our sources, in life examples of our leaders, and in the community life in general. So these three things came to my mind: rationality, spirituality, and search for justice. I had not seen this in any place, but this was my conclusion, alhamdulillah. Then I gave some lectures in London. One Muharram in London I talked about this. One Muharram in Toronto I talked about this. And since then, I am very much, thinking the same way. Actually, I'm more convinced than beginning that these three are very important. And actually, every religion that follows these three together, not just one of them or two of them, three of them together, would have very balanced approach. So we had dialogue with World Council of Churches, and the topic was how to avoid violence in the name of religion, and I suggested these three, and they welcomed and they put it in the statement that all religions should have these three: rationality, spirituality, and search for justice. Some years later, maybe 6, 7, 8 years later, when Ayatollah Khamenei was giving a lecture on Imam Khomeini, it was annual lecture that he gives for demise of Imam Khomeini. He mentioned that Imam Khomeini's understanding of Islam had these three elements: spirituality, rationality, and search for justice. It was interesting for me because my book was in English, and I don't think at that time was available in Farsi, and I had not read any book on these three or heard any lecture on these three. But he had come to this conclusion that these three are Imam Khomeini's, which I think is Shia kind of understanding. In any way, I have lots of stories to share about this, how my Christian friends also welcome this idea. So this is about that part, and you find some lectures I have given to non-Muslims visiting Qom about these three. Then a few years ago, I was giving a lecture again in Toronto, because Alhamdulillah I used to go to Toronto many times. So I was giving a lecture about community building, and in the lecture an idea came to my mind, which again I've been following up. The idea was this: that many times people talk about leadership, which is important. Leadership is very important. Even in the secular world, we have courses on leadership. Of course, then they mean by leadership something more general. But there are courses, workshops on leadership. Some people in the community also have been running courses on leadership. But I said I'm not against having workshops or courses on leadership, but my understanding is that in Islamic model we don't train ourselves to become leaders. At least we don't begin with this. We should train ourselves to be true followers. I gave 2 examples in that lecture in Toronto. We can share with you, inshallah, the link to that lecture. One example was example of our maraja. Normally, our maraja are great lecturers. Actually, the way someone becomes marja normally is that they start with teaching. They are students of a great marja. They have their own circles of teaching, plus they attend lectures of the marja, and they follow that marja. They love that marja. They spend as much as possible time with that marja. Even normally maraja have circles for fatwa. This beautiful practice that some of their best students, who themselves maybe mujtahid, definitely teaching dars kharij, maybe so they choose some of their best students, and And whenever a new inquiry comes or new issue arises, they discuss it in this circle. And after discussion with the circle, the marja makes up his mind and gives fatwa. This is very beautiful because he can make up his mind by reading the sources and exercising ijtihad. But they normally don't do it right away. They do it after discussion. Because when you discuss, then other people may, project a light on the topic. Maybe they, bring different, angles of the discussion into light. Then you can make up your mind. This is a very beautiful, way. So, people who are in that circle are some of the closest and most devoted students of that marja, who love him, who have been, learning from him and spending time with him for decades. And if that marja passes away, these are the people who would be next maraja. So some of them become the next maraja. Hope. If you ask any person in this circle, do you want to become a marja? Do you have the ambition of becoming a marja? They should say, and normally they say, that no. May Allah give long life to our existing marja from him. We are his students, we are at his service. If needed, they are happy to give their lives for marja. Now, people who have this approach, that this is our teacher, we have seen in him knowledge, wisdom, taqwa, we have seen in him good leadership, and we want to help him. These people would be in the best position to learn. When you learn from someone, it doesn't necessarily depend on loving that person or seeing in that person something special. Yeah, you can even learn from an enemy. Theoretically, yes. But I think you are in the best position for learning if you really respect someone, and if you love someone, if you find that someone is, special, has been given some gifts by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are in the best position for learning. Even if it is in an office, even if it is father, mother, grandfather, or a teacher, or a marja, or leader, or ma'sumin, even our imams. When we love someone and respect someone, then we try to pay attention to every details, every little things they said or did, because we know there is wisdom here. So, this was one example. The other example was example of Amirul Mu'minin alayhi salam. Amirul Mu'minin alayhi salam never prepared himself for being a leader. He never had ambition of becoming successor to the Prophet. His main ambition was to be a good helper for Rasulullah. He was happy to sacrifice his life, his money, everything that he had for the sake of success of Rasulullah in his mission. There were many occasions in which Amirul Mu'minin was near martyrdom. Okay? Such person who is a real devotee would be the best person to continue the line if he remains afterwards. If he dies or is killed before the leader passes away, he is happy. If he remains afterwards, he would be the best leader. So anyway, this idea was mentioned in that lecture in Toronto, and then I started thinking about this, and then actually I was surprised to see that many people in the course of history, not majority, but there are good number of people who had the same idea. Even Aristotle had this idea. I didn't by that time know about this, although I had studied Western philosophy for my academic studies, but this particular point was very new to me. So I saw some other people have said the same thing, that leadership should start with followership. Later in London, I invited some of our community members who are active in counseling, running workshops. Some of them are therapists, or psychiatrists. So I invited a group of them, about 10, 12 people, and shared with them this idea. And they very much welcomed the idea, and they also said we should work on this. And later, alhamdulillah, we had chance to have a course on followership in Stanmore for the Khoja community, and that is available online. And then in KLC retreat, in some other places. And alhamdulillah, now a book is coming, inshallah, bi'iznillah. Before months of Ramadan, the book on followership is coming. I mentioned some of the things that came to my mind as characteristics of true followers, which inshallah you will be able to see when the book comes. So certainly one quality of good followers, and in this case, followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, is piety. So we talk about piety, it is obvious. Second, sincerity. Third, about loyalty. Loyalty is very important quality, and closely connected to loyalty is reliability. We don't have time, otherwise I would have asked you, how do you distinguish between loyalty and reliability? My argument is that reliability is a branch or offshoot of loyalty, but it's much more than just being loyal. There are people who are loyal, but the leader cannot rely on them and give them tasks. We need followers who are loyal and reliable. Then truthfulness, then rationality. Good followers are not just obedient. They are obedient, but their obedience is because they see wisdom, they see knowledge, they see commitment to the truth, and they themselves have ability to analyze, and many times they come to the same conclusion. These are the people that are consulted by the leader, and therefore if the leader goes away, there's no gap, because it's not that one person thinks and analyzes, everyone just follows. If this is the system, then when that person goes away, there is chaos. Farsightedness, fairness, being good representatives, and being responsible volunteers. In that meeting with the therapist and counselor, I mentioned, I think, 16 qualities, but to make it simple, so I highlighted in the course and now in the book these qualities. Interestingly, after maybe it was a year that we had that meeting in London, so between that lecture in Toronto and the meeting in London, there was more than a year. But just when we were going to have that meeting, when I was preparing myself, and I then came up with these 16 things, it occurred to me for the first time, although it was a very obvious thing. And I have said that the meaning of Shia is follower. In the book also you see. Then it occurred to me, actually, Shia means follower. So to be good followers means to be good Shia. But because we normally use it for just imams, at the level of imams, so this idea didn't come to my mind at the beginning. But to be a good Shia means as a student, also you are a loyal, student. As a child, you are loyal to your parents. As a, person who works as a muqallid, you are a good muqallid, and so on, so forth. So this is what I wanted to share with you, and I like to receive questions. I think, unfortunately, I spoke maybe more than I expected, but I'm happy to receive questions and